Welcome to Studio 58A, here, live on Facebook. We're inside the studios of the Jamaica Information Service Radio Department, and it's our weekly discussion program coming to you, of course, on Facebook. Thank you, everyone, no matter where you are in the world, for joining us. I'm your host, Vanessa Silvera, and I'll be taking you through today's interview. As you watch, remember to share, remember to send your questions and your comments to make it as interactive as possible, so we can put them to our guests. Speaking of guests, we have two today, and they're from the National Water Commission. One face might look a little more familiar than the other, but they're both here to answer your questions. So we have Corporate Public Relations Manager at the NWC, Charles Buchanan, and with him is Delano Williams. He is the Community Relations Manager for the Eastern Region, or the Eastern Division.
Yes.
Now, I recently found out that NWC splits the country in two instead of north, south, east, west, or central. Eastern is which parishes are in the Eastern Division?
Okay. Let me also say good afternoon to you and to our viewers. The Eastern Division consists of all the parishes going east from St. Anne, so that is St. Anne, St. Mary, Portland, as well as St. Thomas, Kingston, St. Catherine, and Clarendon.
So Clarendon is in the east?
Yes, indeed.
According to the NWC. All right.
For purposes of our operations, we have basically split the island in two. So there is Eastern or West.
All right.
Yes.
So now on to more serious matters.
Right.
You gentlemen are here to talk about the recent breaks in pipelines, not just ferry, but some other areas. And we've been having significantly more disruptions in our water service than usual. Let's start with ferry.
Yes.
Just this week, motorists experienced significant delays heading out of Kingston using the Mandela. This happened in January as well.
Yes.
So is this a regular thing? We just have to buckle up and get used to it now?
Unfortunately, as part of the improvement process that we are undertaking, with a lot of major infrastructure development taking place in a number of critical corridors around Kingston and St. Andrew, and indeed in a few other parts of the country, the National Water Commission has experienced higher than normal frequency of breaks on a number of critical pieces of our infrastructure, water supply delivery infrastructure. So yes, since about December 8th, we have had a major break that is irreparable on an 18-inch pipeline out at Ferry. This is in the immediate vicinity of the overpass, which has been constructed on the new highway. And not only is that break some 35 feet below ground, it also is at a location that were we to undertake repairs, we would cause significant damage to the newly installed road infrastructure. So effectively, we have had to, since December 8th, be operating our water supply system in Kingston, St. Andrew and St. Catherine without the benefit of the 18-inch pipeline. And also at the same time, this has deprived us of some 5.5 million gallons of water each day.
How many?
Corporate area.
How many persons would have benefited from this
Normally,
amount?
this would have served directly in excess of 10,000 customers, or somewhere about 40,000 persons. Indirectly, it also contributes to the service to approximately some 30,000 in total, so 20,000 more than the 10,000 who are directly served by it. another 20,000 customers or another 60 to 70,000 persons are indirectly impacted by this loss of the 18-inch ferry pipeline.
You mentioned that there is absolutely no way of getting water through that pipeline. So where else is the water coming from? I assume it's coming from other communities, which would lead to further, more widespread delays in other areas that don't have breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that. Who wants to take that one?
Well, what is happening, as you rightly put it, is that we now have to implement a schedule of water supply, because with the loss of that 5 million or so gallons of water coming into the corporate area via the ferry pipeline, we now have to be using the Mona and Constant Spring systems to supplement the areas of shortage, namely along the Washington Boulevard and the communities leading off. That effectively means that a number of the communities who normally receive close to 24 hours service are now on a scheduled supply arrangement to facilitate us providing water to the areas that have none at all.
All right.
So essentially we are passively asking customers to basically help us to help their neighbors.
It seems quite active to me because persons are feeling the bite. Now you mentioned Washington Gardens.
Yes.
Where are some of the other areas that are directly and indirectly being affected?
If I take the direct and then leave Delano to do with the indirect,
Yes.
the most direct areas that would normally be supplied, if you're coming from ferry and you come along the Washington Boulevard, you'd begin with Corville Gardens,
Right.
and New Haven and Duane Park, Patrick City, Washington Gardens, as we said before.
Right.
All those communities along the Washington Boulevard coming towards Mullines Road intersection.
Yes.
We also would be impacting communities off Mullines Road, especially the lower section of Mullines Road.
Right.
So coming down communities that would include Olympic Gardens,
Right.
Waltham
Park on the
Gardens,
end.
Morton Park,
Yes.
and down along Waltham Park Road. All of those areas are most directly impacted. You also have a significant impact to communities like Dunrobin Courts at the end of Dunrobin, coming towards the Constant Spring Road intersection,
Right.
as well as Zadie Gardens and State Gardens.
Yes.
Those are some of the main areas that have been directly and severely impacted.
And the indirect areas now that
Well-
you're the ones you're asking customers to share
Right.
their water.
Essentially, a number of the areas served by the Constant Spring system. So now we're looking at the communities such as off Red Hills Road, above Shortwood Road going back up into the Mannings Hill Road area, across to Havendale,
Yeah.
and basically along the right-hand side, going back towards the Barbican area as well. So what happens, as you may have been aware, is that there is a shifting of water where we do nighttime and daytime regulations. So the areas below Shortwood Road are the ones we try to serve. Sometimes there are difficulties, but those are the areas we target during daytime between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. And at the next shift, we go back above those areas, above Shortwood Road, to serve the areas into the early morning period.
So effectively, what we're asking our customers, while they may be able to discern the schedule being implemented based on when they have water, we also just ask them to recognize that given that the system is operating under subnormal conditions, it is extremely vulnerable. So even small other occurrences on the network will create a bigger negative impact
Ripple effect.
on their ability to receive service, because we are already short by 10% of the water we need in the corporate area by not having this 5.5 million gallons from the ferry pipeline.
Right.
So we're trying to make do with have 90% of the water normally required serve 100% of our customers. With that already being the starting point, if you then end up with a break, let's say on the Constant Spring pipeline, let's say the 21-inch coming down Constant Spring Road is broken for whatever reason, and we then will be forced to shut down operations at the Constant Spring Water Treatment Plant. So we would be taking 10, 12 million gallons of water per day out of operation while we are doing those repairs.
Emergency works.
So
You
that then
mentioned-
creates another set of problems.
You mentioned Constant Spring, and Constant Spring pipeline has its own spate of problems
Quite
as we speak.
Yes.
Quite so.
It must be difficult, but why is it that we're having so many breaks in Constant Spring specifically?
We're having a high frequency of breaks because in large part of the major works taking place along the Constant Spring Road corridor. You'd be aware that right now, the government, through the National Works Agency and in collaboration with agencies like the National Water Commission, is working at the implementation of the creation of the new Constant Spring road corridor.
Right.
They're also doing major improvement works for the Hagley Park Road area all the way down into 3 miles. We've just completed major works in a similar way along Barbican Road and are doing some further extensions along there. Because of the major works that are taking place in these various areas, the heavy equipment that is at work, the narrow space in which they have to operate, the fact that they're not only working in what they refer to as a brownfield area, where existing infrastructure is already there and people are living and operating in the area. But think about it, that within this narrow space that you have coming down Constant Spring Road, they now have to be navigating the space while trying to maintain the existing pipelines. They're also laying new water pipelines.
So do you effect lock-offs as well when they are replacing these pipelines? Well, during the laying of new pipelines?
Not for the laying of the new pipelines.
Okay.
Because it was our intention to maintain the older pipes in operation,
Right.
while the new pipes are being laid, and the only time that persons would have encountered the disruption based on a planned schedule would have been when we were switching over and switching the individual customers from the old
network.
pipe to the new pipe.
Yes.
But the unfortunate situation is that because of the close proximity in which the heavy equipment are operating to the aged pipe that we do have, we're having an extraordinarily high frequency of breaks.
So I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing old pipelines and construction.
And those two things kind of don't work well together.
They don't. Is there a way around that, though?
I'm not sure there is, because much of it is unavoidable.
Yes, it's a process.
Some of it we hope would not have happened, and we would have hoped that some of it could have been avoided. But much of the disruptions created by the frequent breakage is somewhat a direct result of having to do the level of major works in such close proximity to existing old infrastructure.
Right.
How much do these daily fixes cost, if you have those numbers?
Quite a bit, and it costs the commission quite a bit, running into millions, in terms of trying to do the repairs on each occasion. On a weekly basis, we may, if we're lucky, have 3 breaks on the pipeline
In 1 week.
in one
Yes.
week if we're
Yes.
lucky.
And how much
some
does it
unlucky
cost?
weeks we have 4 or 5 and even more.
And how much does that cost us?
It
Weekly, just in 1 week.
I wouldn't be able to give you an exact figure no as to what it costs, because it will also depend on which of the pipelines are broken and what's the nature of the break. So we have a 16-inch pipeline that comes down there.
21.
We have a 21-inch that comes down Constant Spring Road. We have a 10-inch that comes down Constant
Right.
Spring Road. So depending on which one of those, all of them are critical, but depending on which one is broken, the cost will change significantly. And depending on how the break occurs, if we need to do a replacement of a section of that pipeline, or if we may just need to do some clamps and repair clamps being affected, that will change the
The
cost
costing.
significantly.
Mr. Williams,
Yes, miss.
when can we expect some reprieve?
Well, we have been working with the National Works Agency as best as we can in terms of ensuring that once their works are finished, then a number of these issues will be basically put to rest, if not, in worst case, minimized significantly. Such as in terms
Yeah.
of the restoration time,
The
completion.
major issue that's affecting us right now being the 18-inch break out at Ferry. We expect at the end of March, based on the schedule provided to us by the National Works Agency, by the end of March to have replacement pipelines in place so that that 18-inch would not be needed, because we would then have replacement pipelines.
Is that still the case, considering we had a break this week? Is the March deadline still feasible?
It is still the date we have been assured,
Right.
and we are pressing that be maintained. For the National Water Commission, it's absolutely essential that we have use of the new pipelines in the Mandela area at the end of March. In fact, persons traveling along the corridor out at Mandela may notice that off to the south, off to the left,
The
if you're
swamp
traveling
area
out
where the
of
mangrove
Kingston,
is. Yes.
yes, there is what looks like another
Service
lane
road.
of road
Yes.
being laid out there. That's actually the pipeline route.
Okay.
So
So it's not part
pipeline-
of the roadway.
No.
Okay.
That area that has been cleared with an embankment built up is intended to be the area in which we will then lay the 2 sets of pipelines to replace the existing old infrastructure that is out at Ferry in the Mandela area.
With coming back to
Yes.
the other deadlines, but those pipelines being so close to the river and inhabited areas, won't the pipelines be in danger?
That's exactly why the pipelines are being raised.
Yes.
So they're being placed on embankments or berms, which will be above the water table, significantly raised, so that the aggressive environmental conditions won't create a problem for the
For them.
pipes. The pipes
Even
actually
when
will
the
be
river is
above
in
ground.
spate?
Even when in spate.
Right.
I think the elevations, I'm not sure exactly how high they'll go just now, not remembering the exact details, but it's about 20 feet wide, perhaps about 10 feet above the normal water table in those swamplands. And the pipes will be visible and accessible to the Commission above ground, reinforced and set in a way that we would be able to easily access them for repairs and maintenance as the
As needed.
years go
Yes.
by.
And they don't, the risk isn't higher than anywhere else in the country where you've done that.
what we normally do, and the engineers do a fantastic job of doing an assessment of the specific environmental conditions, socioeconomic, and all the other potential issues that might impact on a particular pipeline being laid. And based on that, they make a design recommendation. And in this particular case, all of those issues have been taken into consideration
and factored in
making this pipeline, which we believe is the best thing to do.
Another question, are these pipelines made of metal?
The particular case, some are. In this case, I would need to just double check what type of pipe is being
I'm sure you know where I'm going.
out there. I
oh, okay. All right.
But one of the issues is that we hope we don't have any
disruptions,
communities and other issues in the immediate vicinity, and the pipes are being laid in a way that they would be out of reach of normal traffic activity or such.
Right. Okay.
So it should not be an issue. But the fact that it's also visible also gives us an opportunity to observe whatever is taking place with the pipe and be able to take action on it.
Right.
And even have it being patrolled relatively
more readily.
easily.
Yes.
All right.
One of the things we are doing as part of the overall non-revenue water reduction program is to gradually implement what is called a SCADA system, which allows us to electronically monitor water flow and pressure levels at various points, especially along the major transmission mains. So, especially for the Kingston area, which is where the project is centered currently, we'll be able to verify what is the volume of water coming into the 6 Mile area and beyond. And by virtue of that, if there are changes in those volumes, we can readily respond.
So in effect, if there were to be, let's say, somebody is tampered or bored the pipe, we should be able to recognize the change in pressure and flows and be able to dispatch immediately some response to that. So with the use of the new technologies, we expect to be in a much better position to monitor and maintain all of our systems. And that's coming for all of Kingston and St. Andrew and gradually for the rest of the country.
All right, so we're going back to the break. We're just going to be going to the deadline, sorry.
Okay.
But before we do, we want to say thanks to everybody who is tuning in. You've tuned in online, and I see Psycho Henry with questions. So wherever you are in the world watching, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
We're happy you're here, and our guests are here to answer your questions. Speaking of questions, we have one from Psycho Henry. I can make a guess. I think Psycho Henry is messaging us from Hagley Park. Her question has to do with... You just said who?
Yes, we did.
Has to do with
Yes, we
the
did.
Hagley Park section
Right.
of the works and the roadway.
Yes.
You want to talk about the deadlines before we get to Hagley Park?
I think we best address this one. And
All
then go
right.
back.
So her question has to do with the low pressure. Well, I'm just waiting for the question to come up in its entirety.
Okay.
All right. So, one, why is the water pressure along Hagley Park Road low from early December 2018? And with that, they have increases in the water rate every month.
Okay.
All right.
She has another question
Okay.
that follows on. When will normal water pressure be restored along the Hagley Park Road area?
Okay.
Okay.
So, let's go again.
Yes.
Why is the water pressure so low, yet we're seeing more money come in on the bills monthly? And when is the normal pressure going to be returned or restored?
Okay. Well, much of the Hagley Park area is also being affected by what has transpired pretty much since the 8th of December at Ferry. So water supply coming along Spanish Town Road up into the 3 miles area and onto Hagley Park would have been significantly reduced, if not all cut off. What we are also experiencing is that the 3 miles area is now subject to major infrastructural works along the roadway, which all the way along sections of Hagley Park as well, which is affecting, also causing some amount of breakage along those pipelines.
So frequent interruptions are occurring. So
Daily,
the two main
almost.
issues, and I'm glad the person identified that this is primarily since early December.
Yes.
Right.
So it coincides with the break at Ferry, which occurred on the 8th of December and has created a major problem for us. But we also have the frequent breaks along Hagley Park, similar to what we described in detail about Constant Spring Road.
Right.
We're having same issues along
that stretch.
Hagley Park stretch
Yes.
because of the major works taking place there. And while the objective and the long-term intention is to present fantastic improvements and improvements in the level and quality of service, improvements not only in terms of road, but also in terms of water, drainage, and other infrastructure.
And wastewater.
Service provisions, wastewater indeed, as well. In the process, we do know that we are having a severe challenge in meeting the normal expectations of our customers. What I can't understand and would need to have some checks done would be the customers' statement that they are having
Higher
a
charges.
higher bill
Right.
every month. That would not be consistent with the normal expectations,
Right.
and one would need to check on the specifics of that account. One of the things that I can say to persons generally is that in areas where water supply pressure is low, sometimes customers will use the same amount of water, but because the water was not coming as flushy,
Right.
as good pressure,
Yes. Yes.
they feel less satisfied, although they use the volume
The
of
same
water.
amount.
They collected it at low pipes
Right.
and used it, but there is a less sense of satisfaction because it wasn't coming from the
As
shower
consistently.
and heavily.
Right.
The same is true where supplies are frequently interrupted. The customer will be less satisfied, even if they happen to store water for use during the times when it wasn't coming through the pipes.
Yes.
A third thing I would want to say from that is that we want to encourage customers to be careful during periods when the supply is intermittent, on and off, not to leave their taps turned on.
Okay.
So let's say I go to the tap, there's no water there, I've turned on my tap, I don't bother to turn it off or don't remember to turn it off.
Right.
But when I leave home and go to work, water comes back. The tap is open and will run.
Yeah.
It might not mess up the place because it might, if the sink isn't plugged, chances are it won't overflow, but it will all be running water down the drain. So we tend to encourage customers during periods, especially periods of intermittent supply, to do remember to turn off their taps even when there's no water there, because they wouldn't want water to return when they are not aware of it, and for the water to continuously run to waste.
Yes.
Waste and cause
And
problems for
cost.
them because
Absolutely.
Right.
one, it would cost more, and two, the sink can overflow and
That can
Potentially.
cause
Yes.
additional problems.
Absolutely.
The question of when normal water
Right.
will be returned to the Hagley Park area dovetails well into our deadline. So you can start with Hagley Park,
Right.
addressing Psycho Henry's concern, and then you can continue into the other deadlines.
Okay. Well, pretty much end of March into April is what we have been, we are agreed on for the ferry pipeline, mainly for Hagley Park. The other activities that affect us will be the completion date for the two major roadways, namely Hagley Park in the 3 miles area leading up, and the Constant Spring roadway, which are basically the deadlines that the NWA has provided for those. At the completion of those, as proposed, we will be switching over to those new pipeline infrastructure that are in place. And essentially, we will again see some level of normality restored.
So you're saying end of March?
For some
improvement.
improvement. Total improvement will result when we see the completion of those major roadways.
And we're not quite sure when those are going to end yet. So
I do believe
recently.
that I've heard in the
Yes.
summer, in the case of, I think it's Constant Spring Road,
Yeah.
is expected to be completed sometime in the summer, and Hagley Park to be completed a little later in the year.
Might be trending towards year end into
Yes.
early next year.
all right, so Psycho Henry, you can expect a little improvement around about March, April.
Yes.
But in the meantime, bottle up, store up, so you can have enough water to use.
And if I may come in right there, there are pockets, meaning small areas, sometimes sections of particular districts, that even when water is in the system, there are still issues that we are having to investigate. As we speak, I can name 3. There is a section, some of the roads off of Waltham Park Road are experiencing challenges, even though over the last 4 to 5 days, we have actually increased water supply into those
the general
areas.
area.
Friday night gone into Saturday night, we did almost 24 hours of diversion of water into the area, but we still have some areas that are without supply. I can tell you in Verbena, Cosmos, for instance, and we want to assure those customers that we are doing our best to have those issues resolved. There are also sections of the eastern side of the corporate area along Mountain View Avenue, which also have some challenges that we are currently investigating with a view to correcting it. So persons along in Vineyard Town, sections of Mountain View, and down into Manly Meadows may be experiencing some challenges that currently our team is on the ground to rectify.
And what's the timeline for those areas, including Mountain View?
We're aiming to have them corrected within the course of today, worst case 24 hours. And as we go along, we will provide some update as to what can be expected, if not full normalcy.
All right. Any more updates in terms of deadlines?
Well, we have some, since Kingston is in Jamaica, we
Right.
would also want to advise some persons who are outside of the corporate area
Yes.
that we are aware of some issues that are being encountered. So the Agualta Vale system
In St. Mary.
over in St. Mary
Right.
has been encountering some challenges.
Right.
Work is being done.
It was
Restoration is...
we were aiming for last night. Some persons may be if once it's completed today, the regulation should go back to normal. Because these are areas in the Islington side, Robbins Bay area. Sometimes they are regulated. So over the next 24 hours, persons should see the return of their water supply. We also had some questions from Rhine Park in St. James, where we had to do some emergency valve work and customers were impacted. Over the last evening, a number of them would have seen the restoration of their supply. But because the area is also regulated, we crave their patience as we go back to normal.
All right.
You also have in St. Thomas a few systems,
Yes.
and we most of these that we're now talking about are short-term interruptions, which have happened over the last 24 hours
Right.
and will be corrected in the next 24 hours if they're not already corrected.
Right.
So you have in parts of St. Thomas, Drummond,
Right.
and in rural St. Andrew, we do have
yes.
some planned
which is really where Drummond is. Yes, beg your
which
pardon.
would be impacted over the next few days.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about that because it's part of wider maintenance works
Yes,
that you're
it is.
doing in
Yes.
the rural side
Yes,
of
it is.
the country.
Yeah, right.
So I have a release here that says the National Water Commission is advising that it will be necessary to shut down water supply to several communities in St. Andrew in order to carry out scheduled maintenance work at several facilities. You mentioned Drummond Tank. I see here Hibbert Spring and some others. Talk about those maintenance works that are going to be, I see here, for the rest of the week, going into next week.
Friday.
So
yes.
I'm sure residents want to hear about that.
Okay. Well, these systems are primarily what we call rural systems. A number of them serve small communities, but they are subject, some of them are what you call seasonal supplies, which means that during the drier periods, into the drought period, sometimes they go down. Then they are also susceptible to the impact of the heavy rainfall. So siltation it affects them.
And what is siltation?
Siltation is when there is a lot of sand dissolving into the water, topsoil coming down, running through farming communities and eroding riverbanks into what is called the intake area.
Is that the same thing as the turbidity levels?
It does cause it, yes. Sometimes there is not as much siltation, but the turbidity means that the water is somewhat muddy. And what you find is that after a level of treatment as prescribed by the Ministry of Health, we can go no further, and so we have to shut down.
So when you shut down due to turbidity levels, high turbidity levels,
yes,
it's because the water isn't safe enough to be issued or distributed to consumers?
Essentially, yes. Because it means that there's too much suspended particles in the water.
Right.
And the water is too muddy, too brown for it to be distributed to customers. Even if treatment is applied to it, the treatment is not as effective or as guaranteed in the results.
Right.
So even if you, let's say, apply chlorine to a volume of water that is clear and clean, the effect of the chlorine will be far better than if you apply to the same volume of muddy water.
Yes.
Okay. Continue with the maintenance.
The maintenance. So, periodically now, these facilities have to be cleaned, disinfected, and in some instances, we have to also do civil works, which is to sometimes repair or replace sections of the intake area, which might be canals or catchment tanks, which require repair work.
So as part of the ability to give you more reliable service in the future, we have to interrupt the service in the short term to facilitate the systems being put in the best position to serve our customers. And in each of these cases, we try to make the interruptions as short as possible. So you would notice that in some cases, like the Drummond tank, the interruption is between 8 in the morning and 4 in the evening. So we expect to return normal operations after 4 o'clock. In a similar way, we would be moving to do repairs, maintenance work at Kelly Spring on Tuesday of next week. We'll be doing work at Griffin on Wednesday through to Friday.
That will be the most significant shutdown over roughly a 2 to 3 day period.
And that's where? Kelly Spring?
No, Griffin facility.
Oh, Griffin.
Right. So that's in serves the Irish Town, Red Light, Cottage Hill, Cornfield areas, Gale Mountain, Jackfruit Tree, Cameron Hill, Enfield, Ellerslie Way. All those are communities that can expect some disruption.
All right.
We put these notices out to allow our customers, as we again encourage you to store some water where possible for use during the period that you will have the disruptions.
And that's something that we can advise that can be taken by all other members of the corporate area and the wider Jamaica. Stores.
It's always a good thing to store some water for use in the event of interruptions.
All right, so we're going to our comments on Facebook. We want to say hello to Zandra Lee. Zandra Lee, I'm not sure where you're writing from, but she's asking, why is it that they fix the road and they have to dig it up again to put pipes in them? They leave a big hole full of water with a yellow tape, and even if they fix it, it's very untidy. She also has another comment, so I'm going to ask you guys to address that. She's also asking if there is ever the right equipment to fix the pipes that burst in the community. These are questions from our viewing audience, and so we're asking.
Let's answer it this way. I hope we do recognize that in the past the Commission has had significant challenge in terms of the way in which customers and the public perceive our operations and repairs. I want to assure the public that at no point when we do dig or cut roadways, is it out of any malice against the road or anything of the sort.
Or the community.
We only do it when it's absolutely necessary.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we recognize as well that in the past, though, while it was necessary, we weren't always doing them in the most effective way to restore the roadway to the condition we found it. We have entered and we have been striving strenuously over the course of the last year or two especially to improve that to the extent that we have signed agreements with the National Works Agency and also with some of the municipal corporations who own some roadways to say when we are forced of necessity to cut a portion of your roadway, we want to engage you in the reinstatement of that roadway to your satisfaction. So in fact, most of our reinstatement work now, where we do road cuts, is being done not by us, but by the road authorities, so that at the cost of the National Water Commission. So they are paid by the National Water Commission to reinstate to their satisfaction. We have seen some improvements. We still think there's a ways to go because we want to be in a position where we say to persons they are not able to distinguish that there was a cut here because it's so well put together after we have done it that you don't notice that there was a disturbance. But the unfortunate thing, though, is that in many cases we are forced to do these road cuts. I also want to make the case that we have also entered into agreements with the National Works Agency. So under all of their major road improvement programs all across the island, we are making arrangements so that the pipelines in those areas are upgraded at the same time under the same contract, in many instances using the same contractors and subcontractors to lay the new pipelines, so that the issue of a new road with old pipes underneath it,
and then you guys come the next day,
which often happens because the heavy equipment disturbs the old pipe. It often may be leaking the week they put on the top surface, the barber green is put on, but it takes a little while to come to the surface. So within a few days of them moving their heavy equipment off and the nice nylon surface.
I've seen it. Yeah. I've seen it where one day after the work is for I have new road.
Yes.
Like clockwork, the very next day,
something happens
There
and
is
we're forced to
a
come.
team.
right,
On the
a
ground.
team on the ground.
Yes.
That's most
Carrying out
unfortunate.
work.
And
Right.
so we are not only making this commitment, but we have seen where it has worked. So all along Marcus Garvey Drive, where the road widening took place, under the same program, the water supply infrastructure in that area was laid.
relayed. Yes.
All along Barbican Road, where they have already done the road improvement, the water supply and the wastewater infrastructure have been improved. We're doing the same along Constant Spring Road, along Hagley Park Road, along Mandela. Same is true in other parts of the country. Out in Westmoreland, where we're doing road from
Whitthorne
Ferris
area.
to
Yes.
Macfield.
Right.
That's being done with water infrastructure being laid at the same time. In Clarendon, where they are doing some similar work, that's being done. So there is a determined effort to collaborate with the Works Agency to find the resources wherever we need to, so that these upgrading works can be done. The new highway improvement out into St. Thomas, we are already in discussions with the National Works Agency about how the new pipelines will be laid along that new highway. So we are working closely. We're not where we want to be yet, but we are working to get there.
Yes.
And members of the public will see a marked improvement in that regard. Part of the real issue, though, is the fact that we have water supply pipelines all across the country that are much older than their normal engineering life.
Yes.
And it's time to change them.
So they needed
They
to have been
require-
changed many years ago, in fact.
Yes. Yes.
So they are being forced to operate and to give us a little more life. And as a consequence, they leak very often.
So this is the dawning of a new era. You're telling Zandra Lee and other persons who have that concern that there have been increased collaborations with the National Works Agency and the municipal corporations.
Yes.
And so they're going to be seeing less disruptions
And more timely reinstatements
and-
as well.
Yes.
and more timely reinstatements.
Right.
Thank
I
you so
wanted
much,
to make
Zandra.
one- Sorry.
Go ahead, no, go
I
ahead.
wanted to make another point. She alluded to the areas excavated sometimes being left open across the KSA mainly, but in other places as well. There are times when we do work that actually requires us to leave the space open, hence the tape and so on, for
Why?
a time. It might be, for instance, a number of cases where a valve is being installed and follow-up checks need to be made. There are some instances where leak repair is also done, and again, follow-up checks need to be made. What we say to you is that if, for instance, it is not restored or completed over a 7-day to 14-day period, you may alert us. We have several platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that you can connect with us. Send us a picture, share it with us, and we'll be happy to follow up.
Who is culpable should someone, for example, a person with a disability or a child, fall into one of these ditches? Who is
We
responsible?
take... Sorry, Charles?
Well, let me just say that in all instances where, especially with projects, there are arrangements for insurance and various kinds of liability protection. And so depending on the particular contract, there is usually provision as to who would be responsible to ensure that
The public
persons
is safe.
so impacted are compensated. We hope we don't have any of the instances.
Yeah, we really do.
So
Yes,
that,
we do.
that would happen. And the contract management process usually sees us trying to put a lot of emphasis on the safety of the public while you're trying to do the work in the quickest and most efficient way possible.
You haven't said who is responsible, though. I get that that's in the contract,
would-
but would it be
right,
the
so-
contractor? Would it be NWC?
In most
Would it be
cases,
the person?
contract, depending on the particulars of the contract, but in most contracted jobs, the contractor is required to indemnify the commission against such liability. So it's the contractor who is held initially liable. But the Commission has an interest to make sure that no one is injured by works that it has initiated. And so were someone to make contact with us, we would then be able to direct them appropriately.
Okay, so you would be the point person if something happens, God forbid, something happens and they say, well, you know,
they
so
go
and
ahead
so
and make
and
a
so.
claim to the contractor on the ground. If they are having any difficulty in doing that, they may direct it directly to the Commission, and we will work it through the appropriate person. But they must always recognize that they need to make a claim, do so in writing. Simply saying to somebody loudly that you have been inconvenienced and you need to be compensated does not amount to a proper claim, which needs to be put in writing so that for auditing and other purposes, it can be tracked and followed up properly.
All right, I'm getting the wrap signal. I'm just going to take one more question here from Marlene Andrade. Okay, so Marlene has an issue. She says whenever she hears the word NWC, certain things come to her mind. So she's wondering, do your workers on the ground know what they're doing? So is it that do you deploy? All right, let me just ask. Does NWC know what it's doing?
Absolutely, yes. I think in a number of ways, part of the issue is the complexity of the water supply business and infrastructure, and deficiencies in the existing operating environment that our staff are required to do. I'll tell you, we can tell stories after stories about the creative ingenuity of our staff in effecting repairs and keeping the systems operating. But in truth and in fact, they shouldn't be required to be making some of these ingenious ways of getting the system to stay in operation.
Yes.
The system needs to be better. But we also have challenges in that persons often compare a water supply operation unfairly, unreasonably with other types of service delivery. So, for example, when a customer in a particular area is told that the water supply is restarting at your treatment plant, they expect that means I can get water at the same time. Okay. So if you say that you are restarting operations at 6 o'clock this evening, they expect that I'm a customer served by that system, I should have water at 6 o'clock. That might have happened if you were dealing with an issue of electricity, where as soon as the grid is switched back on, everybody all along the network effectively is back online. Water takes a much more circuitous and slow moving process. So someone will sometimes wait for hours before they begin to receive the service. But there's so many additional factors that might prevent them from getting service when everything has been done on the operation side to do so. So
isn't that an issue with your communication though? If you say you should be getting water at 6 o'clock, I would expect water at 6 o'clock.
Well, in most cases, which is what we actually usually say, that we will restart operations on the system at X time. Persons then interpret that to mean that I will have water at that same time.
But as a layman on the road,
persons will get the water at very widely. Let's say an example outside of Kingston. Let's say a Greater Mandeville system is out, and you shut down at Pepper Wells, at the foot of the Spur Tree Hills. When you restart pumping there, most of your customers are up in Mandeville. But it will take several hours for the water to move from the well to the first pumping station, then to the second pumping station, then to the third pumping station, and then to get to the reservoir at Kingsland and elsewhere to begin to circulate to the customers. And some customers will begin to get it. You may even have a customer on the left-hand side of the road who is on the lower side, who begins to get service 5 hours after we have started pumping. But their neighbor who is on the opposite side of the road, on the top side, the higher side, at the higher elevation, who is still without water 2 hours after that, their next door neighbor has had water.
So do you include this in your releases? Because I know the NWC sends out releases on a daily basis. Do you include that in your release? Because if I'm a layperson on the street and I read this, but that's not included, I might misinterpret and feel, well, I should be getting water in another hour because it's 6 o'clock.
We don't. It's not normally included in all the details. But we'll reconsider that. We may need to say it a little more often, if not at all times, but at least add to the explanation. What we normally say is that customers will gradually begin to receive service thereafter, which is a generality to mean the detail that I've just explained. But you may be very right that we may need to say this a little more often as to the complexities that might delay one individual customer from receiving service long after another.
All right, so it is time to wrap.
Yes.
Final statements from...
I would love to use the opportunity before Delano does to say that despite all of the disruptions, which we do ask for the patience and continued cooperation of all our customers, everyone who is impacted by disruption, whatever the cause, it's not the Commission's desire, and we want to have that corrected as quickly as possible.
I think you want to look into the camera and tell them.
So we're doing at the National Water Commission all we can to resolve all of these various issues as quickly as we possibly can. I also want to indicate that we are making a number of project commitments to see major improvement in the water supply delivery capacity of the Commission over the course of the next year and into the future. So we expect our customers to begin to benefit in short order from a number of the investments that have been put into the water infrastructure, and some of which are giving us problem even now. But the ultimate objective is to see major improvements. So Kingston and St. Andrew will see major results of improvements over the next course of several months, and even the non-revenue water reduction program, which we have underway in Kingston and St. Andrew, is already reaping some results. And we'll be happy to come back and talk to our customers when at that time they are feeling the benefits of a much improved supply.
Yes. I too want to thank our customers right across the island for being patient with us over the vast number of years, for being loyal to us. And even though for the most part we are the main service provider, for choosing us as your water service provider, we recognize there are challenges, and that's why we are willing to meet with you wherever possible. And we also want to invite you to continue to dialogue with us, our social media platforms, our email addresses, visit our customer care centers, and in the coming months you will be seeing the full rollout of our web chat, which allows customers to speak one-on-one with our customer service reps at times of their pleasure.
All right. Give us the website where they'll be able to access
currently
the web chat.
NWCJamaica.com. Once you type that into your address field, it takes you straight to our homepage, and the link is there. Just look out for it for the web chat. The social media platforms are NWC Jam, at NWC Jam for all of the platforms. So you can hit us up on that as well.
All right. And when you said shortly for
the
web chat is presently being done on a pilot basis, so some features are there now, but we are working on having it expanded
full rollout
with full rollout to come in the coming weeks.
All right.
Yes.
It is time to wrap, though. We've gone on quite a while, but I just want to say thank you, gentlemen, for coming, for sharing with our audience, for sharing with me and everyone around the world the work of the NWC, providing some updates on the work that's happening.
Yes.
And as you said, we're feeling the pinch now. It's a little more than a pinch. We're feeling it now. But in the coming months, it's going to be eased and we're going to be seeing greater results. So,
Absolutely.
you know, in another year or two, people can bathe in them shower,
Yes.
take and do all of these things because it matters when you have running water. It makes so much of a
Absolutely.
difference.
It does.
An essential service.
It is. Water is life. Water is life. Thank you so very much for joining me, for sending in your questions. Thank you for joining the discussion. We had a robust discussion today. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for your comments. And remember to send us questions if you didn't get to ask before or during the live broadcast. Send us questions so that we can field it to the NWC and have them respond under in the comments section. Remember, our audience plays a key role in our show, so if there is somebody you want to see, just drop us a line and we will be sure to make those arrangements for you as soon as possible. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Jamaica Information Service. And you never know who might be in studio next. We also have another broadcast coming up tomorrow, so look out for that. We do this every Thursday live on Facebook, and I've been your host, Vanessa Silvera, and see you next time. Thanks for joining us here on Studio 58A Live. Have a good day.